Detective Laura Bennett stood frozen in her office as the knock faded from her door. But the silence that followed felt worse than the sound. She didn't move for several seconds. Then she slowly reached for her desk drawer and pulled out her service weapon, standard procedure, but tonight it felt heavier than usual. Outside her door, footsteps began again. Not leaving. Circling. Like whoever there was deciding whether to enter. Laura didn't speak. She shifted quietly to the side of the door, positioning herself out of direct view. Then, silence. A full minute passed. No movement. No sound. Just the hum of fluorescent lights above her. She exhaled slowly. And that's when her computer screen lit up again on its own. No input. No login. Just a single file opening. Case 8814, Emily Carter. Except it wasn't the file she had opened earlier. This version was different. Updated. A new line had been added at the bottom. Case REOPENED by unauthorized user, D. Harlan. Laura's blood went cold. That was impossible. Sheriff-level access was required to modify archived case metadata. Even she, as a detective, shouldn't have been able to see that level of system activity. And yet, there it was. Her hands moved quickly to check system logs. Every action she had taken tonight had already been mirrored. Someone had been watching her screen in real time. Not remotely. Locally. Inside the station network. She grabbed her phone and called IT support. No answer. She tried dispatch. Static. Then a voice came through the radio on her desk. Calm. Familiar. Detective Bennett. She froze. That voice didn't belong on the channel she was using. It was the sheriff's private frequency. Sheriff Harlan continued. You're digging in places that don't want to be opened. Laura kept her voice steady. Then why is your name inside an 18-year-old missing persons file? A pause. Then a soft exhale from the other end. Not anger. Something worse. Amusement. Because I was there. The line went silent. Laura pulled the radio closer. At the scene. Before it was a scene, Harlan replied. Her grip tightened. Where is Emily Carter? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, you should stop asking questions about people who chose to disappear. Laura stood up instantly. That's not what the evidence says. For the first time, his tone sharpened slightly. Evidence is what people who don't understand context rely on. Then the line cut. Dead silence again. Laura grabbed her jacket and left the office. The station hallway was empty, but not normal empty. Unnatural empty. No officers at desks. No movement. Even the TV in the corner, usually playing local news, was turned off. She walked toward the records room. The door was slightly open. Inside, files were scattered across a table. Like someone had been there moments ago. She approached slowly. And then she saw it. A map of Millstone County pinned to the wall. Dozens of red markings. All connected. All converging toward one place. Millstone River, Riverside Bridge. The same location she had been avoiding thinking about. Her eyes moved across the table. There were printed case summaries. All of them stamped. Closed by order of Sheriff Harlan. But one detail stood out. Each file had a secondary annotation written in different handwriting. Not official. Personal. Almost like notes someone didn't want entered into record. One said, recovered safely. Another, threat neutralized. Another simply read, Handled. Laura stepped back. This wasn't random. This was organized, systematic, controlled. She realized something that made her stomach tighten. These weren't missing persons cases. They were classified outcomes, and someone had been tracking them like a ledger. Behind her, a chair scraped. Slow. Deliberate. She turned sharply, but the room was empty, except for the radio on the table. It crackled again. Harlan's voice returned. Closer this time. You're standing in a room full of misunderstandings, detective. Laura whispered. What does that mean? It means, he said quietly, you're looking at consequences without seeing causes. A beat. Then, come to the river tomorrow morning if you still want answers. The line went dead. Laura stood still. Her instincts screamed not to go. But her investigation had already crossed the point of no return. She looked at the map again. At the red markings. At the river. And then at one detail she hadn't noticed before. One of the case notes didn't say handled or closed. It said, witness cooperation confirmed. Emily Carter's name was beside it. Laura's eyes narrowed. Cooperation. A missing person did cooperate. Unless she wasn't missing at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by footsteps in the hallway again. This time faster. Multiple people. Approaching. Laura quickly gathered the files in front of her. But before she could move, the lights in the records room shut off completely. Total darkness. Then a flashlight beam cut through the room. And a voice said calmly, "Step away from the files, detective." Deputy Collins stood at the door. Behind him, 2 more officers, all with weapons lowered but ready. Laura slowly raised her hand slightly. "You're protecting him," she said. Collins didn't respond immediately. Then, "We're protecting the town." Laura shook her head. "From what?" Collins hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. Then he said, "From what happens when control disappears." A silence filled the room. Laura looked at the map again. At the river. At the names. And finally understood something she didn't want to understand. Sheriff Harlan wasn't hiding crimes. He was hiding the system that prevented them from ever happening again. But systems like that don't stay clean forever. They evolve. And sometimes, they become something else entirely. Collins stepped forward slightly. "You don't want to finish this investigation." Laura looked at him. "I already did." That was when her phone buzzed in her pocket. One new message. Unknown number. She opened it. A single image loaded. A photo of the Riverside Bridge. Taken just minutes ago. And standing at the center of it was Sheriff Harlan. Waiting. The image on Laura Bennett's phone didn't disappear. She refreshed it. Closed it. Reopened it. Still there. Sheriff Daniel Harlan standing at Riverside Bridge, alone, hands in pockets, like he was waiting for something that had already been decided long ago. But the strange part wasn't the photo. It was the timestamp. Taken 6 minutes ago. Laura's instincts fired instantly. Either someone was physically there watching him right now, or the sheriff himself had sent it. She grabbed her jacket and moved fast. Deputy Collins stepped into her path before she reached the exit. "You're not going," he said. Laura didn't slow down. "Move." Collins didn't. For the first time, his voice dropped lower. "If you go to that river without understanding what you're walking into, you won't come back the same." Laura locked eyes with him. Then explain it to me. A long pause. Then Collins stepped aside, but only slightly. You think you're chasing a disappearance case, he said. You're not. Laura stopped. That got her attention. Collins continued. You're chasing the beginning of everything that made this town stable. Before she could respond, he added one final line. And the end of it. Riverside Bridge, 5:42 a.m. Fog covered the river like a blanket. The kind of silence that didn't feel natural, it felt maintained. Controlled. Laura stood at the edge of the bridge, scanning the area. No cars. No backup. No sheriff. Just water moving slowly underneath, like it had been doing for decades without interruption. Then her radio crackled. You came. Harlan's voice. Calm, close. Laura spun around. He was standing at the far end of the bridge, exactly where the photo had shown him. But something was off. He wasn't armed. He wasn't hiding. He looked like a man who had already accepted every possible outcome. Laura walked forward slowly. You wanted me here, she said. Harlan nodded once. I wanted you to see it. See what? He gestured toward the river. What people call missing. Laura didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the water. Cold, dark, moving. Emily Carter, she said firmly. Where is she? Harlan didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, do you know how many people disappear in big cities like Philadelphia every year without a trace? Laura didn't blink. This isn't Philadelphia. No, he said, it's smaller. That makes it easier to notice patterns. A pause. Then he stepped closer. Emily Carter wasn't taken. Laura's grip tightened. Then what happened to her? Harlan looked at the river. She came to me. That sentence didn't make sense. Laura frowned. She was 19. She was reported missing. Harlan nodded. After she left her old life behind. Laura shook her head slightly. That's not what missing means. For the first time, Harlan's expression changed. Not guilt, not anger. Something more complicated. Regret mixed with certainty. People assume disappearance means force, he said, but sometimes it means escape. Laura stepped closer. Escape from what? Harlan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He handed it to her. Laura hesitated before opening it. Inside were handwritten entries. Names, dates, locations, and short notes beside each one. But not police notes. Personal observations. Struggling home life. Possible trafficking risk. Drug connection confirmed. Witnessed violent exchange. Laura flipped through faster. Every entry belonged to someone who had gone missing. But none of them looked like random victims. They looked like a pattern. A system of selection. Laura looked up. These are targets. Harlan corrected her immediately. These are people who would not have survived the system outside this town. Laura froze. So you removed them. Harlan didn't deny it. That silence was the answer. Laura's voice sharpened. You kidnapped them. Harlan shook his head slowly. No, I intercepted them. A beat. Then he added. Before the system outside did. Laura stepped back slightly. That's not law. Harlan looked almost tired now. Law is a suggestion when order collapses. The river behind them kept moving. Steady. Unbothered. Laura finally said it. Emily Carter, was she one of them? Harlan nodded. She was the first. Laura blinked. First what? Harlan looked at her directly now. First one I saved. A long silence followed. Then Laura opened the notebook again. She found Emily's name. Under it, risk, runaway, possible exploitation, high vulnerability. And then a final note. Relocated, safe, voluntary cooperation. Laura's mind raced. You staged her disappearance. Harlan corrected her again, softer this time. I removed her from a situation that would have destroyed her. Laura shook her head. You falsified records. I protected her, he said. The wind picked up over the river. Laura looked around. At the fog. At the silence. At the structure of control that had been built around something no one in the town questioned. Then something clicked in her mind. How many others? She asked quietly. Harlan didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation told her everything. Finally, he said, enough to stop what was coming into this county. Laura's voice dropped. And who decides what, coming? Harlan looked at her for a long moment. Then said, I do. That was it. The line. The boundary. Laura closed the notebook slowly. That's not protection anymore, she said. That's control. Harlan didn't argue. Because he couldn't. Instead, he said something quieter. Control is what keeps people from becoming victims. Laura stepped closer again. Or it makes you the one deciding who becomes one. Silence stretched between them. Then, a distant engine sound echoed near the bridge. Multiple vehicles. Vast. Approaching. Harlan didn't move. Laura turned her head slightly. Who's that? Harlan exhaled. The part of your investigation I warned you about. The vehicles appeared at the far end of the road. Unmarked. Federal plates. Laura's breath caught. You knew they were coming. Harlan nodded once. This was never going to stay hidden forever. Agents began stepping out of the vehicles. Weapons ready. Radio chatter filled the air. Laura looked back at Harlan. Why bring me here? He met her eyes. Because you needed to understand before it ended. Laura whispered. Ended. Harlan looked at the river one last time. Everything built to prevent chaos eventually becomes something people fear more than chaos itself. The agents shouted from behind. Sheriff Harlan, step away from the detective. But Harlan didn't move. Instead, he looked at Laura one final time. Now you decide what millstone becomes next. And then, he raised his hands. Slowly, the riverbank exploded into motion. Federal agents moved in fast, boots hitting gravel, radios crackling, commands overlapping. Secure the sheriff. Clear the bridge. Eyes on the detective. But Laura Bennett wasn't moving. She was still looking at Sheriff Harlan. He stood with his hands raised, calm in a way that didn't match the chaos around him, like he had already lived this moment before. An agent rushed forward and pulled him back. Harlan didn't resist. Not once. Laura stepped toward him instinctively. You planned this, she said under her breath. Harlan didn't look at her immediately. No, he replied, I prepared for it. That distinction mattered to him. But Laura wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were locked on something happening behind the agents. 2 officers from Millstone County had arrived with them. And both of them weren't speaking. They were just watching. Like they were waiting for instructions that weren't being given yet. That's when Laura noticed something disturbing. The federal team wasn't treating Harlan like a violent suspect. They were treating him like a containment priority. Not a criminal. A system risk. Inside the mobile command unit, 6:31 a.m. Laura was pulled into a temporary command trailer for debriefing. A federal agent slid a folder across the table. No introduction. No small talk. Just, you opened something that was already sealed once before. Laura opened it. Inside were classified summaries, redacted reports, encrypted case reviews, sealed internal audits. But one keyword kept repeating. Millstone Stabilization Protocol. She looked up. What is this? The agent didn't answer immediately. Then finally, it's the reason your town doesn't look like the cities you came from. Laura flipped pages faster. Crime statistics, disappearances, intercepted trafficking routes. And then something worse. A chart showing disruption events over 20 years. Each one aligned with a missing persons case Sheriff Harlan had handled. Laura's voice lowered. You're saying he was operating under federal oversight. The agent hesitated. That hesitation again. Not exactly. Laura's stomach tightened. Then what? The agent leaned forward slightly. He was operating in a space we chose not to officially acknowledge. Laura stared at him. That's not an answer. He corrected her. It's the only honest one you'll get. Back at the bridge same time. Harlan sat on the ground, still in custody. But something strange was happening. The agents weren't talking about charges. They were arguing quietly among themselves. Laura caught fragments. Protocol breach. Unauthorized continuation. Why wasn't this terminated earlier? She stepped out of the command unit without permission. No one stopped her. That was the first red flag. She approached Harlan. He looked up at her calmly. They're confused, he said. Laura shook her head. They're afraid. Harlan almost smiled. Same thing in different uniforms. Laura crouched slightly in front of him. Explain the protocol. Harlan looked toward the river. 22 years ago, Millstone was a pipeline. Laura listened carefully now. Drug routes, trafficking corridors, organized movement through rural counties, he continued. This wasn't a quiet town. It was a passing point. Laura frowned. So you cleaned it up. Harlan nodded. Not alone. That line hit differently. Laura's mind started connecting fragments. Federal reports, redacted assistance, silent approvals. She whispered, You were working with them. Harlan corrected her gently. I was working inside what they couldn't officially run. A beat. Then he added, We stopped threats before they became statistics. Laura stood up. You mean you made people disappear? Harlan didn't deny it. But he clarified. We made sure they didn't continue. The wording mattered. Too precise. Too rehearsed. Laura turned toward the river again. And suddenly something clicked. Emily Carter wasn't a victim, she said slowly. She was part of that system. Harlan finally looked at her directly. She was a test case. Laura froze. A test for what? Before he could answer, a loud crackle came over the federal radio. Command, we have unregistered data activity from local server infrastructure. Laura's head snapped toward the command unit. Inside, screens were lighting up without input. Files were opening automatically. Deleting. Rewriting. Rebuilding. One agent shouted. The Millstone archive is rewriting itself. Laura ran back inside. What she saw made her stop cold. The entire case database had changed. Names were being reclassified. Cases marked closed were now marked. Active continuity file. She stepped closer to the screen. One file expanded on its own. Emily Carter. But now there was new information. Status integrated. Location confirmed within protected population. Risk assessment stable. Laura whispered, "What does that mean?" An analyst answered behind her, voice uneasy. "It means she's not missing." Laura turned sharply. "Then where is she?" The analyst hesitated, then said something that didn't make sense at first. "She never left the system." Silence filled the trailer. Laura felt it deep in her chest. Not confusion anymore. Recognition. She walked back outside. Harlan was still seated, watching everything unfold like it was inevitable. Laura stood in front of him. "Emily Carter is alive." Harlan nodded. "Yes. She never disappeared." "Correct." Laura's voice sharpened. "Then why did you falsify her case?" Harlan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because the truth of what she became would have destroyed what we built." Laura stepped closer. "What did she become?" Harlan didn't answer immediately. The river behind them kept moving. Slow, endless, unchanging. Then he said, "Proof that intervention works." Laura stepped back slightly. "You turn people into evidence." Harlan didn't correct her this time. That silence was heavier than anything he had said before. Suddenly, one of the federal agents approached Laura. "Ma'am, you need to see this." He handed her a tablet. On it, live surveillance footage. A building in Millstone County. Underground facility. Secure access. And inside, people. Not prisoners. Not victims. But residents. Living normal lives. Cooking, working, talking. Laura zoomed in. One face froze her completely. A young woman. Older now, but unmistakable. Emily Carter. Laura's breath stopped. "She's here." Harlan spoke quietly from behind. "She has been for years." Laura turned slowly. "This isn't protection," she said. "This is containment." Harlan finally stood up. For the first time, he looked tired. Not powerful. Not controlled. Just human. "Call it what you want," he said. "But those people are alive because no one else cared enough to stop the system that was consuming them." Laura stared at him, then at the river, then back at the facility feed. And she realized something terrifying. There was no clean ending here. Only systems. And choices. Behind her, the federal commander gave the final order. "Shut it down." And in that moment, Sheriff Harlan looked at Laura one last time. Not as an officer, not as an enemy, but as someone passing responsibility to the next hand. "Now it's yours to decide what survives." The command order hung in the air like a loaded weapon. "Shut it down." Inside the mobile unit, no one moved immediately. Because what they were looking at wasn't a simple, illegal operation anymore. It was a functioning system. A population ledger. A hidden network that had existed longer than most of the people in the room had been agents. Laura Bennett stood frozen, staring at the live feed of the underground facility. Emily Carter was there. Alive. Walking through a hallway like it was just another normal place. No fear, no restraints, no signs of distress. Just existence. That detail unsettled Laura more than anything she had seen so far. She turned slowly toward Sheriff Harlan, who was now standing under guard near the edge of the bridge. "This isn't rescue," Laura said. "It's relocation." Harlan nodded once. "It became that over time." Laura stepped closer. "You don't accidentally build something like this." Harlan's expression tightened slightly. "No," he admitted, "you don't." A silence followed. The federal commander entered the frame behind Laura. "We terminate the facility. All assets, all records, all personnel involved." Laura didn't look away from the screen. "And the people inside?" The commander hesitated. That hesitation again. It had become a pattern in this entire case. "They'll be processed according to federal protocol." Laura finally turned around. "Processed?" The commander's voice lowered. "Reintegrated, evaluated, resettled." Harlan gave a quiet, almost bitter breath behind her. "That means scattered," he said. "Unknown outcomes, untracked futures." Laura felt something shift inside her understanding. For the first time, she realized both sides were speaking in systems, not people. Control versus collapse. Containment versus exposure. Neither side was offering a clean truth. Only versions of survival. Laura stepped outside the command unit again. The river was still there, moving like it always had, unbothered by human decisions. Harlan was still under guard. She approached him one last time. "Why me?" she asked. Harlan looked at her calmly. "Because you were the first one who asked questions without being part of the system." Laura frowned. "That's not an answer." Harlan corrected softly. "It's the reason you're still alive." That landed heavier than anything else he had said. Laura looked toward the federal agents preparing to move in. Then back at Harlan. "If I shut this down," she said, "everyone inside loses protection." Harlan nodded. "Yes. If I don't shut it down, it continues outside oversight forever." Another nod. "Yes." Laura exhaled sharply. "So either way, people get hurt." Harlan didn't deny it. Because he couldn't. That was the truth neither side wanted to say aloud. The commander's voice cut through again. "Final authorization required, Detective Bennett." All eyes turned to her. Laura felt it. The weight of something far bigger than a case. This wasn't just millstone anymore. It was precedent. If this system stayed hidden, it continued unchecked. If it was destroyed, it erased everyone inside it, people who were still alive. Emily Carter included. Laura looked at the screen again. Emily was now sitting at a table, talking to someone, laughing. Normal life inside an abnormal structure. A life that shouldn't exist, but did. Laura whispered, "How many?" Harlan understood immediately. 47 active cases, he said, over 20 years. Laura closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. And how many would have survived without it? Harlan answered honestly. Less than half. That was the final piece. Not justification. Not innocence. Just probability. Laura stepped back. Everyone was watching her now, waiting for the decision. She walked toward the command console. Her hand hovered over the authorization panel. One command. One decision. The entire structure either remained hidden or was erased. Behind her, Harlan spoke quietly. "Whatever you choose, you're deciding what kind of world you believe exists." Laura didn't turn around. Her voice was steady now. "No," she said, "I'm deciding what kind of world gets to keep pretending it's clean." A long silence. Then she pressed the button. System response, initiating termination protocol. Red alerts flashed across every screen. Inside the facility feed, alarms started sounding. People inside looked up suddenly. Confused. Then moving. Uncertainty spreading through corridors that had never experienced collapse. Emily Carter stood still for a moment. then slowly walked toward a hallway exit. Not running, not panicking, just aware. Laura watched everything unfold. The commander spoke. Containment breach protocols active. Harlan closed his eyes briefly. Not in relief. Not in anger. Something closer to acceptance. The facility feed began shutting down one layer at a time. Rooms went dark. Corridors lost power. Data streams collapsed into static. One by one, the system disappeared, until only the river remained on the screen. Laura stepped away from the console. Her hands were steady, but her expression wasn't peaceful, because nothing about what just happened was clean. It was necessary, and still wrong in places she couldn't fully name yet. The agents moved in to secure Harlan. No resistance. No escape attempt. As he was led away, he stopped beside Laura. "It never stays simple," he said quietly. Laura looked at him. "It shouldn't have existed at all." Harlan gave a small nod. "Maybe not." Then he was taken. 1 week later, Millstone County. The town was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one felt uncertain. Laura stood on the riverside bridge alone. No agents. No sheriff. No system watching from behind the curtain. Just water. She received a final file on her phone. Case closure report. Most sections were redacted, but one line remained unsealed. All subjects accounted for under federal review, status pending reintegration outcomes. She understood what that meant. No one was truly gone. No one was fully returned. Just redistributed. Laura looked out over the river. And for the first time since this began, she wasn't thinking about guilt or justice. She was thinking about cost. Not of crime, but of control. A voice came from behind her. "You did what they couldn't decide to do for 20 years. Laura didn't turn immediately. She already knew that voice. Deputy Collins. He stood a few feet back. "Do you think it was worth it?" he asked. Laura finally turned. She looked at the river again, then said quietly, "I think the real question is, what do we become when we decide we're the only ones allowed to decide what's right?" Collins didn't answer, because there wasn't a clean answer left anymore. Only consequences. Laura walked away from the bridge. Behind her, the river kept flowing. Unchanged. Unmoved. Like it had survived every version of human control layered over it. And in Millstone County, peace was gone, but truth had finally surfaced.